Closer and closer the noise came until trepidation reached out and laid a hand on Evan's heart, as the most powerful entity of all emerged from the darkness, coming to rest within touching distance of the mortal. Chapter 36. When I was 11 years old. As Evan was walking through the darkness, he was wondering how long it would take for the changes which Woody made in his life to have an effect upon his own. Perhaps things are already different by the time we get home, whenever that is. He felt as he had been walking in the darkness for quite a long time, longer than he and Faith had walked when their journey had first begun. Maybe I'm successful already, and my garage has had an extension. Or it's a completely different garage, a large garage, which I need in order to accommodate my new cars. And then it was there, the concrete beneath his feet, as opposed to grass. He could barely contain his enthusiasm at the expectation of his successful new life, which was surely waiting to greet him. As he walked forward and his hand eagerly worked its way along the wall, he wondered if the new light switch would be in the same place as the old one. It was. The light clicked on, but Evan's eyes took a moment to adjust after walking in the dense darkness for such a long time. As things came into focus, he had to shake his head and his senses to make sure that they were working in conjunction with what his eyes and his mind were registering as fact. The sight which greeted him was an assault to his reasoning and his expectations, as the stolen car was still parked in his unaltered garage. "Calm down, mate," his mind told him. "You have only just left your young self, sat beneath the branches of old Ignis, reading his document and folder. Give the boy a chance." Of course, yes. And the stolen car is still in my garage because I never drove it to the meeting place on account of the fact that I was in personificadia. The importance of the car's situation became deflected as something else grabbed Evan's attention. From out of the darkness at the back of the garage, something or someone was rummaging around amongst the rubbish bags on the floor. Closer and closer the noise came until trepidation reached out and laid a hand on Evan's heart, as the most powerful entity of all emerged from the darkness, coming to rest within touching distance of the mortal. The newly arrived entity wore a dark shroud topped with a hood, which silhouetted the face inside, and Evan knew nothing of the expression which it wore. For one optimistic moment, he hoped that it was a friend of Faith's, sent to help him understand the two documents, the opportunity, and perhaps dispose of the car. Evan's instinct told him that this final entity may not, in actual fact, be here to help him in any way whatsoever. Evan found himself ever so slightly lowering his head out of an unasked-for respect. The new arrival had somehow managed to impose his authority with his mere presence before he had even spoken. After gathering his composure, which had momentarily been abducted by the arrival of the entity in the shroud, Evan inquired of the new identity what the purpose of his arrival was. "Who are you, and what is it that you want from me?" Evan had no idea what kind of an answer he would be given, and certainly not the one which he received. "Those," was the intense reply from inside the hood. Then a hand from inside the shroud reached out and took Evan's documents, placing them inside the cloak. "I'm that," said the document taker, as once more he reached out, this time with the intention of taking the pouch containing the opportunity. "No way," objected Evan adamantly, and he held the pouch tightly against his chest. The hand that was at first going to take the pouch changed its intention and took Evan by the scruff of the neck instead. He was flung across the room like a rag doll drawn by a jealous sibling. As he hit the garage wall, all the air left his diaphragm, and he nearly passed out from the impact with the wall. It made him think back to the incident in the pool room, and just as retribution had secured Evan's watch, this new entity had held on to the pouch, securing the opportunity as he threw Evan across the garage. Evan knew there was no way that he could retrieve his belongings by force, and he quickly realised that his only hope was to plead for them. Having no alternative, he began to solicit their return. As soon as Evan began to speak, the pouch was opened and the opportunity removed. The sparkling sphere was placed between the hands of the shrouded figure, whereupon it was crushed. The opportunity was then rubbed vigorously between the dream-destroying palms of his omnipotence until all that remained was a handful of glitter. One sharp blast of breath and the glitter was dispersed into the air. Each tiny piece shimmered to the floor and faded, along with Evan's hopes of a new life. The plan of action was then removed from inside the shroud and torn into small pieces, which were then tossed nonchalantly into the air. The pieces fluttered to the ground, with one of the shreds finding its way onto Evan's lap. He tilted his head and read the strip of paper. It read, "The key to success in all things." "I suppose my future document is going the same way," suggested Evan, after himself and after the entity. The powerful figure advanced upon Evan, grabbed him by the wrist, and pulled him to the back of the stolen car. He opened the boot and pointed down at its contents. "This is your future," he informed Evan, as he pointed down to the bootful of stolen paintings, silver goblets, candelabras, a pair of dancing figurines, and some gold coins in a display case. Evan then realised that the venue had been changed back to the manor house when he was a no-show. "No way. How can that be? I never even went to the manor house. I've been with Fate and Wooded the whole weekend. How can this be?" he agonised. Evan's despair made him lose sight of the fact that he ought to be very careful of the way in which he should speak to, never mind question, this new entity, who could very well be dangerous. Against all the rules of etiquette between the all-powerful one and mortals, Evan began to ask questions of his omnipotence. "Why would you do such a thing? Destroy my possessions? Why are you so angry with me when I don't even know who you are?" Too many questions were competing with too few answers, and nothing seemed to make any sense. Why has this happened? His omnipotence would normally, at the very least, ignore questions from a human subject. He was not used to being held accountable to a mere mortal, and it was, to a certain extent, somewhat intriguing. Besides, he considered Evan to be merely a pawn in Fate's game of outmaneuver his omnipotence. So he began to shed some light on the dilemma which Evan had come home to. "You tried to cheat me, and with the help of Fate, you tried to change the things that I decreed must be. Fate did not even have the courtesy to come and speak with me regarding your journey. Yet I am the one with the power to change things. I am the one who preordains all things." Evan dared to wonder who this powerful being was that spoke of the rank which he held over Fate and all entities. Fearful of the reply he may receive, but knowing he must ask the question, he pushed onward. He faltered momentarily, and for one fleeting moment he almost backed out. The need to know, however, was greater than the fear of what the answer may be, and it forced the question out. "Who are you?" The figure seemed to grow in stature, and then raising an arm as though to pluck the answer to Evan's question out of the air, he replied, "I am the power that decrees the way things are and the way things must be. I am the omnipotent force that dictates the course of events throughout your life." Each time that the entity added another piece of information as to the disclosure of his identity, he pointed at Evan or he touched his own chest. I am the force that controls the outcome of all events in your life. I am the one who makes all the major decisions in your life. He moved up close to Evan, and for the first time, Evan caught a glimpse of the eyes that were reflecting his own future, cold and empty. His omnipotence at last told Evan his name. I am Destiny. The name Destiny hung in the air like the spirit of a great warlord waiting to swoop down on Evan if he dared to be audacious. Evan remained silent out of respect for the entity, Destiny, and fear for his own mortality. The implications of coming face to face with such a commanding entity began to dawn on Evan. He soon realized that if fate was not capable of preventing this latest entity from destroying the plan of action, the opportunity, and his future, then he was far too powerful for Evan to manipulate. He looked at Destiny, and Destiny looked back at him. Evan wanted to ask his omnipotence an array of questions, but he was afraid of the answers which he may receive. He wanted to ask about fate and about what had become of his young self. He wanted to ask about a future document which was still inside the shroud. Destiny was moving away towards the back of the garage and the darkness. "Wait!" shouted Evan in desperation. Destiny turned and glared at the mortal who had dared to verbally accost him, and he started to advance upon Evan. "Please, sir," he grumbled, "could you please explain to me how I've managed to anger and offend you to such a dreadful extent, and what I can do to make things right?" Good manners were an attribute which Destiny held in high regard, so he overlooked Evan's audacity and allowed him a few moments of his attention and time. Destiny enlightened Evan as to the errors which had been committed. "You should have informed me of your desire to set off on the journey and then sought my approval. Unquestionably, you should have come to me and asked for my blessing, and absolutely the number one requirement from anybody setting out on this kind of a journey is to request my permission to change things." "I didn't know I should," Evan tried to reason. I didn't know how to find you. I didn't even know of your existence or your name." A sudden realization hindered Evan's efforts to pacify Destiny's irritation, as he realized that he may have just offended his omnipotence by mentioning that he knew nothing of Destiny's existence. He pushed past his indiscretion and continued with his reasoning. "Please wait, Destiny. Please give me a chance to make things right. Now I know what is expected of us." He was willing to beg for the sake of the boy. Destiny began moving away until finally, at the edge of darkness, he called out to answer Evan's pleadings. Fate knew all of the procedures and protocol. Fate knew the rules. Fate knew all of the rules. He then walked away into the darkness. A few ominous words that Destiny used while talking about fate and the rules were trying to let Evan know that something terrible was wrong with Fate's well-being. The words that were trying to enlighten Evan as to Fate's plight were competing to be heard over the thoughts and questions which were clamouring around inside his head. Although he could not grasp what it was that would not be ignored but would not identify itself, his instincts told him that something dreadful had happened. Fate knew the rules. He knew the rules. Evan recalled Destiny's words while trying to prompt the evasive meaning to make itself heard. And then the terrible realization clarified the elusiveness which had been bothering Evan's thoughts. Fate knew the rules. He knew the precious rules. Past tense, not present, and that can only mean one thing, that Fate is no more. Evan was devastated. The loss of the documents and the opportunity now meant nothing in comparison to the loss which he felt for his newly acquired and most decent friend. Destiny had left, had gone back to his chambers. Fate was somewhere that Evan would be better off not knowing about. Woody was with Scooby and his brother. As Evan would realise once the events of Woody's admonishment had caught up with Evan's present awareness. Unfortunately, the stolen car was still in his garage, but even more pressing was the fact that it was still full of stolen antiquities. "I've got to get rid of them, along with the car," he told himself. He tried to be calm in the midst of all the swirling confusion and all the devastating pain surrounding the condition of dear Face, who had, after all, only tried to help two friends. He opened his garage door and was greeted by a sight so unwelcome that he would rather have faced another confrontation with retribution. Flashing blue and red lights heading towards his house confirmed to Evan the fact that Face, like mortals, was fallible. Evan's head was spinning faster than the lights of lost liberty that were almost upon him. Knowing he could neither run nor hide, he entertained the notion of chasing after Destiny. "It's my only chance," he said. I need to go through the darkness to find Destiny and then plead my case." "There's naught back here except some cobwebs in a garage wall," said a self-satisfied voice from the shadows. Evan recognised the voice, hated the voice that sickened him, the voice which he thought was gone forever. Once more the voice spoke, smug and sarcastic, pulling Evan's nerves even tighter than they were already twisted. "I told thee it'd never work," declared Pessimism, stepping out of the shadows. "I told thee not to waste their time, but they wouldn't listen." Evan found it rather disturbing that he hated an identical clone of himself to such an extent that he felt quite capable of murder. The only thing preventing him from strangling Pessimism was the uncertainty of the effect that it may have upon himself. He was about to stand up to Pessimism's at all lasso smugness, which was the last thing he needed right at this moment, when a voice from the garage entrance gave him a start and made him turn around. Instantly, Pessimism seized his chance and returned to the mortal from whence he came. "You need to put these on," one of the three officers informed Evan, holding a pair of handcuffs aloft. Evan shook his head. "I haven't got him into being in trouble," he informed the officer, feeling as though all the fighting in him had packed its bags and gone to live in a retirement home for old, worn-out could-have-beens. "It wasn't a request," the more serious of the officers made clear the message to Evan, and then to really drive the point home, two of them rushed him and grappled him to the ground. One of the police officers locked him in a chokehold, while the other one cuffed him, undeniably, on the tight side. Evan wondered just how valuable the antiques from the manor house were, certainly much more than Evan had realised, what with all the rough handling and obvious anger that was present in the garage. As he was escorted down his driveway towards the waiting police van, one of the more accommodating officers spoke and asked him, "Will you ever learn your lesson?" I thought I had. I really thought I had." The angry officer pushed Evan hard into the caged van so that he could join his two waiting accomplices. He then locked the door. Evan sat in the police van with his head bowed, choking back his tears. After a moment or two, Evan looked up at the two men sharing his vehicle of imprisonment, the one with the cold hard stare sitting next to his asthmatic brother, Scooby. Evan's insights finally got the better of him. He looked at the two brothers and told them the long overdue truth. "I should have stopped hanging around with you two when I was 11 years old."